Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Think and Grow Show with your hosts, Dr. Z
and Professor P.
Dr. Z, who do we have with us today?
Oh, we are so excited. We have the tremendous, the fabulous, what did you say, scrumptious?
Julie Scrumptious.
Julie Jones. Julie is an author, a speaker, a coach, a trainer, you name it, a former police officer, for Milwaukee. But Julie is an adventure and breakthrough coach. Oh, that is awesome. I've never heard of that before. So, Julie, take it away.
Boy, that sounds so exciting, Julie. Did we leave anything out, or did we pretty much cover all of it?
Well, you covered everything. The only other thing that I would add is that I'm a TV producer as well, because I'm
That's
pretty
right.
proud.
I knew you were going to leave something out. Sorry about that. Okay.
And listen, it's a long list of, things that I do, hence the reason adventure and breakthrough coach, right? So
Nice.
it's all about living life out loud, which is what I do. And, quite honestly, the television show really wasn't on my radar last year when I launched it. And I got a message downloaded to me to have a bigger platform to let, my message out there, other people's messages out there. So that's why I started a television show. And I'm pretty excited about where that's headed as well.
Okay, so is that where you want to start? Do you want to give us a little backstory? Tell us a little bit about your history. You were a former police officer for the Wauwatosa Police Department, if I'm correct. We are you're out there in Arizona right now. I used to live there. We live in Wisconsin now, so we've got some like-mindedness, I'll call it.
Yes, we do. Although I will say that I find it really interesting that people who lived out here in Arizona move back to the Midwest for the cold and the snow. However, it's such a great place to be from, the Midwest, because of the ethics and how people are genuinely kind. And I am so grateful for the opportunity that I grew up in Wisconsin. I still come back and visit at least once a year. I love it. It's my Midwest roots, and I wouldn't change anything in my life journey. So you asked me the question about law enforcement to what I'm doing now. And it's kind of interesting because when I was getting ready to go to college, I initially was going to go into medical technology.
Wow.
I have a strong background in math and science, and that's the direction I wanted to go. And as I reflect back, my best friend that I met in kindergarten, we're still friends to this day. Her father was a law enforcement officer. He was a police officer for Milwaukee PD. And that must have had some type of influence on me, because then I decided to declare my major and I stuck with it. Criminal justice. I have a Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice and a minor in psychology. I went to UW Platteville. So if you know where Platteville is, it's 5,000. The town is 10,000. 5,000 of it is college students.
Right.
I loved my experience though. And when I graduated, I started off a little bit in corrections with an emphasis on law enforcement, and then eventually worked for Milwaukee County Sheriff's Department, as well as the Wauwatosa PD, where I was on the SWAT team.
Wow.
And their SWAT team is like a part-time type of thing. So you got called in when, when stuff was happening. So, yeah.
That is so interesting. But I see, so you mentioned a minor in psychology, because I'm a forensic pathologist, so I'm very aware of the criminal justice system. But I thought it's so interesting because then I transitioned into life coaching. I said transition from death into life. But talk about that transition, because it is, I always think it's easier as a coach if you're coaching in something that you're already kind of familiar with. Maybe your first couple of clients or people that you used to work directly with, and maybe yours are. But how was that transition for you? Because for me, it was pretty daunting.
It's a transition that probably happened a little gradually over time. However, not really. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So, one of the hardest things, and I'm sure working in forensics as well, is that when I was in law enforcement, having to do death notifications, letting loved ones know that the person that they cared about, they loved, was not coming home that day, right? Because of a tragic accident, a homicide, whatever the situation was. And as a police officer, you're not expected to show a lot of emotion. I had a lot of empathy for people.
Mhm.
However, it really hit home for me was that when my mom was only 57 years old, she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's.
Mhm.
And she only lived an additional 2 years after that diagnosis, and she passed away at the age of 59.
Mhm.
And when she passed away, all my parents' dreams went to the grave with her, right?
Yeah.
Because my parents had been of the generation that you waited until you retired to live your life.
Mhm.
And luckily, my mom and dad had been retired for a few years because my dad had worked for the city of Milwaukee as well, and he was able to retire at the age of 55. But it just wasn't what they expected, what they anticipated. And then when my mom passed 30 days later, my grandmother passed. So
Wow.
two highly like influential females in my life were suddenly gone. And it was at that moment that I made the decision that I wasn't waiting on my life,
Mhm.
because being law enforcement and in my own family, nobody promises you a tomorrow. And
Right.
so it took me a little while to know that this was my passion. Like,
Mhm.
I've always been a speaker, and I've always been in front of a room, and I've always coached people. I just didn't know that there was a business around it,
Yeah.
right? Because I was the first one to go to college, and I
Mhm.
was also the first one to ever think about having my own business and being an entrepreneur. See, that
Wow.
was not what my family was. And there was
Right.
nothing wrong with that. But my parents had that employee mindset, right? Like, you
Yeah.
work for someone, you retire, you get your pension, all those kinds of things. So, my dad for a while thought I grew 6 heads because, he's like, what the heck? What are you talking about that you're going to have your own business? Why are you leaving law enforcement? I'm like, because it didn't fulfill me. And it gave me great skill sets. Like, I'm so appreciative for that career.
Yeah.
Yet there was just too much negativity for me. And that was not where I wanted to put my focus and my
His
time.
thinking was, "Are you crazy?" Right? Because he grew up in that generation of, it was a different world then, though, right? People weren't there. Entrepreneurship was like, what's that? No, hardly anybody even knew what that was. So, the thing that a lot of entrepreneurs face is when they share their stuff with people, their family members, whatnot, they're trying to look out for your best interest, but they're actually inhibiting your growth because be a settler, take it easy, stay safe. Why would you leave the law, the police force? Which I'm curious to ask you. So, how did you put food on the table when you shoot from, I'm going go west, young lady, and you're out there, and now what did you do to really get? What was that? Tell us about that transition. What? How? Give us some details on
Well, life always offers us opportunities, right? And
that.
it's being willing to say yes. So my
Mhm.
ex-husband and I had met as police officers for the city of Wauwatosa. We weren't
Mhm.
married, and we decided to move. And there's a little blip in there that I often don't talk about, because
Mhm.
we moved to Iowa.
Mhm.
And and it was such a quick transition because we left Wisconsin. He had an opportunity for some entrepreneurial things along with a friend of his, so we moved
Mhm.
to Iowa. Hated it. Like, it was the
Mhm.
worst winter. It was like, what are we doing here? And we almost went back to Wisconsin. And I really want to make this point, because sometimes for so many people, it's the comfortability that we can fall back into and not
Right.
take the risk. So we had contacted the department to ask about going back. Now, they would have, like, I think, welcomed me back with open arms. They had maybe some concerns about him. Not that he was a bad law enforcement officer in any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
He actually is a great law enforcement officer. He's still working in that arena today.
Mhm.
However, it was just something about the captain at the time told us that we were going to have to go through like another background, and we were going to have to start at the bottom of the list. And like, we had only been gone like a few months, right?
Wow.
And so I looked at that and I said, nope, that is, again, I don't like being told what to do. And
Yeah.
nobody's going to dictate for me like that's how it's going to be. So we ended up saying, okay, we want to move someplace warm. My parents had been snowbirds, and my mom had not been diagnosed at the time.
Mhm.
We had decided between either Arizona or Florida, and things started moving really rapidly in Arizona, which is where my parents were.
Mhm.
And so we moved, we picked up, like we sold our house in Iowa, like really quickly, like a lot quicker than we thought we would.
Mm.
And we moved to Arizona without jobs. But then what happened was is we moved into an apartment complex where I currently live. I live in Fountain Hills, Arizona.
Mhm.
And within a couple of days of living there, I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to get a temporary job. You go back into law enforcement, get through the academy, because we were both going to have to go through the academy again.
Mhm.
And then I will go into the academy once you're done. Well, the apartment manager got fired at the apartment complex that we were living. I walked in, I said, well, I need a job. And I was a resident assistant in college. I'm like, I probably can do this, right? They never interviewed me. They never had me do an application. The very next day I went in, they hired me on the spot.
Wow.
And so that was like the transition, right? And then I started doing that. Now I know enough about myself. I'm not an office person. It was one of the reasons why I went into law enforcement, because I wanted the day-to-day difference.
Yeah.
But I also soon really realized early on that I didn't like working for someone, because I wanted to have the flexibility, to take off time when I wanted to. But more importantly, like, you work so hard for somebody else.
Right.
And again, they're dictating everything. I'm like, if I'm going to work this hard for somebody, I'm going to work this hard for myself.
Yeah.
And so shortly after working at the apartment complex, I started on my journey of, being an entrepreneur.
Wow.
Cool.
Wow. And so what was it maybe that helped you in terms of, obviously then the next step is getting clients, right? I mean, again, were there aspects of law enforcement looking back now that you think actually helped you in that?
Sure. Like I told people if they didn't work with me, I was going to handcuff them.
Nice.
I wish I could have said that, right? I wish I had had my handcuffs sometimes, like, just even being a property manager, because I was brought up like, you paid your bills first, right?
Yeah.
And so like rent was due the first of the month, and I'd have to go like hunting people down to get the rent.
Wow.
And I'm like, what is happening here? I'm like, why, again, like those woulda, coulda, shoulda. And
Yeah.
I will say that the best part of law enforcement was helping me to deal with, communication,
Yeah.
communication skills, learning how to deal with conflict without fighting. Because that was a big one for me. I would rather talk people down, and I was kind. See, I treated people the way that I wanted to be treated, because everybody can make a mistake, right? And sometimes, like people were devastated, especially like for drunk driving or something like that.
Right.
I'm not talking about like the criminals that were in and out all the time. I'm just talking about anybody at any given time can have something happen that they weren't expecting to happen. So the communication skills really helped me. But it was when I left law enforcement and I was working for the apartment complex, and I started my own business at that point, it was the networking. It was going out and really connecting with people. And the biggest thing that I took from law enforcement was integrity, my word, right? And so when I was out networking and I would meet people, and I'm a natural connector of people, like you need something and this person needs something. And I was always introducing people and helping people to build their business. People remembered that. So when I launched everything with my business and I was out there and I had developed a really great reputation for myself, people were like, hey, what's Julie up to? We want to talk to her. We want to have conversations. And, the rest is history. But it's all about reputation management, I guess, is a great word to use. Because like even on social media, I'm very cognizant, I'm not painting a pretty picture. Like if something happens to me, I will put it on there. Like it's not all sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns in my life. It's really not. However, at the same token too, I'm not airing my dirty laundry, and I'm not like, like, hey, I'm partying and all this other kind of stuff. That's not, you know, and again, like my party days were before social media. So I don't have to worry about any of that making it to social media. Right? So,
Nice.
yeah.
So I love to talk about how, for all the coaches out there, all you coaches out there listening, or people that are thinking about starting a coaching business, consulting, give us some insight to the early days and maybe a bump or two along the way. And it's always good to talk about the struggles, to let people know that you, with our stuff, we know that it's not a race, it's a marathon, right? So you have to hang in there. I see so many people give up and quit way before, 6 months, less than a year. Well, I tried. No, I'm like, you got to give it at least 2, 3, however long as you can, and stay the course, because the universe will eventually say, all right, dude's going to do it. I better just let him go for it. Right?
That's right. It reminds me of that cartoon, and I'm sure you've seen it, the gold miner, right? And he's got the pickaxe and he stops 3 feet from gold.
Right.
Right. Like that's where I find, if anything else, I am very tenacious. And like when I set my mind to doing something, I'm going to make it happen. I will figure out a way. Just like, we talked a little bit about it earlier. Back last year, it was not on my radar to produce a television show. And then I got the message. Somebody, introduced me to the television producer, Zandra, and I'm on the Zandra network. And it was like, I didn't know what it was going to look like. I said yes, and then I'm going to figure it out. Right. Yeah. Like that's, how I am. Early on, I will say that probably my biggest challenge was maybe not enough belief in myself. Okay. Like I think that I wasn't all about like certifications, right? Like I had done a lot of personal growth. I've even worked for a personal growth company. And so I have always been a lifelong learner. I love to learn. I love to study. Like I'm a sponge. When I learned about personal growth, like I couldn't get enough of it, I was like, oh my gosh, like, cause I'm like, why don't they teach you this stuff in college? Right. Or why don't they teach it in
right. We're totally with you on that, by the way. That's what we are.
It's like, there was so much great information. I'm learning all this stuff about myself. And it was that journey, but then there was still parts of it that I didn't, always believe in myself. Right. And initially what I did was I was afraid to ask for what I was worth. I'm like, oh, well, you can't afford me. So like, I'll just charge you less. Right. And then that happens to be the person that wants the most from you. And like, they've paid the less. I'm sure like you're laughing, Dr. Z, because you've probably been a coach, right? Like, it's happened. And like, you get to that point. And the biggest thing that I can tell anybody that's out there is coaches need coaches. So I have several coaches right now. And I tell people all the time, if you're looking to hire someone, it's a red flag if your coach doesn't have a coach, because we don't know it all. And I'm always learning and growing. And because if I don't know an answer for a client, I'm going to admit I don't know the answer. You're right. Like, I don't know how to help you with this, but I will either have somebody in my tool belt that I can help you with, or I will figure out the answer. And it never ceases to amaze me. Like one of my coaches will talk to me about something. They will teach me something. They will train me in a modality. And then that week, one of my clients like can benefit from it. And so now I'm supporting them, right? It's a ripple effect. If you think you know it all, I'm here to tell you, you don't.
That is great. Well, one of the things that we're kind of moving into is with couples, and so I think it's interesting. You said that your first husband, your ex-husband, was in law enforcement, and then you had referenced in one of your, I think it was a post, and also in your book about your husband having a major seizure in front of your eyes, and so. Can you talk about the relationships and how that inspires you or maybe holds you back? from somebody.
Well,
Power
so with
couples, by the way, you
power,
guys. Let me
power
jump in
couple.
real. Sorry, power couples. That's our new segment, right? We got. I didn't even mention it. I was so excited to have you on the call, and I'm like, this is Coach's Corners with Julie Jones, right? But yeah, I've been thinking about this segment for a while. I've been saying to Zelda, we got to do this, and I already got the name, power couples. So
Yeah.
sorry to break in.
No, like I love it, and it's actually very interesting that you should talk about that. Everything is synergy, and we'll have to talk off the podcast.
Yeah.
But I'm looking to start doing some retreats here in
Oh.
Arizona, and one of the things that I am looking at is couples. You know, like for
Nice.
couples, because I coach both men and women.
Mhm.
A lot of times, I'm actually drawn. Men are very drawn to me because of that masculine energy,
Yeah.
and I have that, take no crap like attitude. It's like, you're not paying me for fluff. I'm going to be very direct, but I come from a very loving heart.
Yeah.
So with my ex-husband, like things were great when we were both in law enforcement. And then it was the journey of being an entrepreneur that really threw him for a loop, because he as well was very black and white. Like, you worked, you got a paycheck, that kind of thing. And he didn't like the direction that I was attempting to go as being an entrepreneur, because in law enforcement, you still have this attitude of like suspicion. Like everybody's suspicious. You don't trust people. I mean, I still honestly won't sit with my back to the door a lot of times, right? I mean, I still have that so ingrained with me because I like to be scanning and like watch
Yeah.
the area, right? It's just part of who you become. And there was nothing wrong with that, but him and I just grew in two different directions. I mean, it was pretty obvious when one time, like I went out with, his coworkers, and they're all talking about work, which is what I used to do as a police officer as well. However, now I was doing other things, and I was like, wow, like, can we talk about anything else? Sure, I could bring up some of my war stories or the things that I had experienced, but there was so much more to life than just talking all the time about, what you had seen, what you had done, like work, 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 work.
Yeah.
And so we just grew apart, and there wasn't like, I mean, I still will wish him a happy birthday, the happy holidays, like all that kind of stuff. We didn't end on bad terms. We just moved in two different directions.
Yeah.
And then my current husband and I, and it's actually kind of funny, Professor P, because we own an HVAC company. So you talk
Really? Wow.
right? So we have an HVAC company as well as a landscaping company, and we've known each other. Interestingly enough, him and his family, they lived on that apartment complex that I managed.
Wow.
So we've been friends. I've known him for 21 years, and we've been married. This coming October will be 11 years. So we've been together. And the incident that you referred to, yeah, it was probably another moment in my life that showed me this idea of stop waiting, start living. So we had been at a wedding on, I remember it, November 6th. And the date's important because of what I'm going to share. And he had just, returned from going to the bathroom. And I thought he was joking because like there was a song on, and I thought that like he was going to start to dance. And it was actually a massive seizure. And he died, at the wedding. And luckily there was like off-duty police and off-duty fire that resuscitated him. And the paramedics were called. They had to like recharge his heart. And they took him to the emergency room, and he spent, 5 days there. And I think some of my law enforcement background kicked in because like the paramedics were explaining everything to me, and I'm like, I know, I got this. Like I went into this, like, I shut down, like I shut down, like emotion wise, like I was just, so focused on, and praying, like, please let him be okay. Please let him be okay. And then, like the aftermath of him being in the hospital, all those kinds of things. And the reason that the date, because I had planned on November 17th just, what is that, 11 days later, that I was launching my first book, Stop Waiting, Start Living. And my publisher came to me and said, based on everything that was happening, she's like, do you want to put this on hold? And it only took me like a second to say no, because as much as what was happening with him, it was, like the universe, God, giving me that opportunity. Like, are you going to wait? Or like, you're launching your first book. This has been a dream. And my husband was so supportive of me launching that book that I knew he wouldn't want me to put it on hold either.
Right.
So I went ahead, he got out of the hospital, and, I launched the book that went on to be international bestseller in 3 countries. So,
wow.
You said he was officially dead right? Did you say that?
Yeah, they had to resuscitate him. So he stopped. Yeah.
Any idea how long he was officially dead?
No, it didn't seem that long, but I'm not 100% sure, because like everything was happening, so quickly, and it seemed like it took forever for the paramedics to get there. Yeah. And the fact that the paramedics had to, like recharge, his heart and stuff like that.
Sitting there with a stopwatch.
No, like, because everybody's coming up to you and they're like, oh my God, and like everybody started to pray, and, and it just so happened that, interestingly enough, and see, this is why I am such a believer, is that particular weekend, we were not supposed to be at the wedding. I was supposed to be training a group of women, and the other facilitator decided to cancel it that weekend because we just weren't getting the response. So the wedding was a last minute decision of friends of ours that were all part of this personal growth company that I used to work for. Oh. So they all went into, intention, and the prayer and everything else to make sure. I mean, if it had to happen, he could have been at home by himself. Yeah. And nobody else would have been there, right? Yeah. And the fact that all these people were there and we had all the support and people were checking in, and, people were hearing about it and how can we help you and how can we support you and stuff. Yeah. So I felt well supported. Mm-hmm. It's just, it was not, again, that's when I talk about this whole idea of rainbow, sunshine, and unicorns, right? Right. That happened. And I didn't post a lot about it, but when I did post about it, just, briefly, hey, this is what's going on, people were incredibly supportive, and I know the power of prayer really helped as well. So,
right. That's very powerful. The reason I asked is because this is incredible. There's a gal I know, I go up to the gym, and she's a pool person. I'm in the pool. She's starts telling me stuff. I died for 20 minutes. I'm like, no kidding. And then there's this guy named Rami El-Batrawi, wrote the book, Can You Really Think and Grow Rich, which is episode number 3 for us. In his book, he tells the story of how he died for 20 minutes. This is the 3rd time somebody told me about how, in your case, it's your husband. I'm like, that's incredible. I don't know what it means, but I couldn't resist mentioning it. All right, let's move on. So I'm looking here at this book that you wrote a snippet in.
Well, the anthology, yeah.
The Entrepreneur's Toolkit for Success. Yeah. And I like that you titled it Blow Up the Box. And then you go on to say, I don't fit in the box. I am authentic and true to who I am. And I don't live in comparison or bow to anyone's expectations. People, that part of not comparing yourself. I just read a book recently, The Gap in the Gain by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy, and that they talk about that. I'm like, this is more confirmation. Once again, I don't know what it's confirming, but it's incredible that all this stuff is, this synergistic stuff is coming out of the woodwork everywhere, right?
Yes. Synchronicity.
Well, I'm a big believer that when you start to hear a message over and over, start paying attention. It's really some higher power is telling you this is something you need to be, kind of looking at and seeing why it's a message in your life.
Yeah, for sure.
So tell us what you mean by blowing up the box. I'm like, guys, Julie's bringing dynamite today. Better have your earplugs and your hard hat on because she's going to blow it up, everybody.
I think for so long, and I guess I probably will say, because I grew up, I was born and raised Catholic. I went to Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, right? And everything was always so structured. Right. And, and I talked about earlier, I'm such a rule breaker, not a rule follower, right? And I just think so many people always say, think outside the box. And I'm like, the hell with the box, right? Like, in my chapter, I talk about the fact that people are not living their life out loud, and they're going to end up, before they know it, in the box, right?
We don't need no stinking box.
Yes, 6 feet, 6 feet underground, right? And it's the things that we do that we put ourselves in the box. See, I already put on, like my googly-eyed glasses,
nice.
I wear costumes. If you look back on some of my Facebook posts, I have walked my dogs in the neighborhood like an inflatable dinosaur costume. I'll get hey, Julie Jones, was this you in the neighborhood? Because if not, I don't know who it was, but it was hysterical and yada, 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 right? It's it's all about loving who you are and just really doing what it is that you want to do. I just think of all the things. At 46 years old, I did a bikini competition. It was something I'd always wanted to do. I said yes to that. And, I took 5th place, and people are like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, but it wasn't about winning.
Right.
And I remember distinctly this one woman saying, you know what, Julie, it is your smile. She goes, I was so nervous to get on stage. You were the first one getting on stage. You turned around, you smiled at me. And she said, I had so much more confidence to get up on stage because I'm about having fun. I think we've lost the fun aspect in our lives. It's you don't have to be serious and then go out and have fun. You can incorporate fun by just sometimes saying yes to those last minute opportunities. There have been so many times where we're so quick, even myself, to want to say no, I've got all this stuff to do. The stuff will wait.
Right.
Memories and magical moments will not. So this past week, and we talked about this, you guys had asked me to be on this podcast a while ago, which I was super excited to have the opportunity. And it was my scheduling because I had family coming into town.
Yes.
And my goddaughter came into town and my nephew just left last night. I mean, 2 18-year-olds that decided they wanted to spend spring break with me and my husband because they knew how much fun and adventure we were going to have. And I cleared off my schedule as much as I possibly could to be in the moment.
Nice.
That's the things that they'll remember for a lifetime is the time they came out here, not the things that I send them or money that I send them or anything else. It's about time.
Because let me jump in here real quick. You just mentioned Lifetime. One of my favorite movies is It's a Wonderful Life. And I love the part where they're on the phone, they're talking to the guy and the rich dude in New York, and they look at each other, and I think she says, it's a chance of a lifetime. Right? I love that part because it's just, there's such a huge lesson in there. People, stop, take a breath, stay in that present moment and enjoy what you have.
But when did the costume start? Because it's so interesting. So being in business and wanting to stand out from the crowd and stop the scroll, I always think to myself, what is something I can do to just push the envelope a little more? And for me, obviously, I'm a forensic pathologist. I'm used to being behind the scenes. So even doing something like this is way out of my comfort zone. But when did the costumes come in? Because I love that.
To give you an idea what she's talking about real quick, her and I were in a real estate meetup group. We both had been going for over a year and never said boo to a goose to either. It was crazy. All of a sudden, 16 months later, whatever it was, hey, what do you do? Or something, right?
Well, he would say lucky. He would say lucky to me. And I didn't even know. I'm like, why? And he did it a couple of times. I didn't even really know what he looked like, but he would just say lucky.
Who's this guy?
And then I was just like, why do you keep calling me lucky? And then he's like, because you're always winning stuff. And I'm like, I do? But they would have these raffles, and I guess I won a couple, two, three, 4 times.
And that was the lead-in,
That was
right?
the lead-in.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
The rest is history. Look, I mean, like, again, you don't know, like, what you're saying yes to that is going to lead to something else that you never expected. I think so many times people, like, expect things to look a certain way. And you've got to be open to the idea that your answer may come anywhere, for you, as far as what you are doing, right? Like, I mean, stop looking for it to happen a certain way and just be open to the possibility of what may happen. So the costumes, I've always loved Halloween. And in fact, my husband and I had a Halloween wedding. 200 people showed up in costume.
Wow.
So like we were in costume. Everybody was in costume. There's something about costumes, I think, that are freeing. Like I have to say, like, going to college, I did many Halloweens on Madison State Street, like,
nice.
the big Halloween costumes and stuff like that. And so I've never been afraid to put myself out there. In fact, I belong to BNI, which is Business Networking International. And, whenever they have a theme day, like, they know I'm so excited because, like, whatever costume, I've shown up as a unicorn. I've shown up as a hot dog. I've shown up as a fish. Like, I just show up because it makes, first of all, people smile. I mean, I have a costume for every holiday. I'll walk around in my town for Thanksgiving as a turkey. Like, I have a turkey costume, right? And people are always like, oh my God, that's so cool. Like, I wish I could do that. And I say, and why can't you?
So do you have a costume only closet?
Or a warehouse.
My husband always gets so mad. He's like, my warehouse is supposed to be for, like, all my stuff. And yet I've got all these costumes and I decorate for the holidays. My mom loved to decorate. She was the one that, like, she used to decorate for every holiday. And I probably got that love for her. And then, of course, trick-or-treating.
Yeah.
Back in Wisconsin, you always had to put your costume over, like, the winter jacket, right?
And boots.
Yes, and boots. Yes.
Nice. I love that.
Wow, this is incredible. So we're going to have to wind down. I'm already thinking, I think it's going to be a no-brainer. I'm imagining that, we have the booking it segment. So you're an author. Would love to have you back on the show for that and maybe more follow-ups. I think eventually we're going to end up with people that we really resonate the most with that are going to be repeat guests on our show. So what say you?
Well, I just wanted to ask one more question.
No, we can. Yeah, okay, go ahead. But yeah.
Okay, so you say, what say you about being on it? Or being
Is that a yes?
Yeah.
Oh, it's an absolute yes. Of course it's a yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I had to confirm.
Good. No, I just wanted to ask, like, how have you changed since being an entrepreneur and being on this entrepreneur journey? Because, we had you do the personality profile. You're very action oriented. You like to have fun. You like to have freedom.
Yeah.
What's changed, would you say, from when you started the entrepreneurial journey to where you are now?
I think the biggest thing is that when you're an entrepreneur, it's not starting off with the discipline. Like, there's something to be said about, like, having the freedom and the fun to do what you want to do, yet you have to have a sense of discipline and focus.
Yeah.
And that was probably my biggest thing. My husband used to affectionately call me squirrel, like shiny object syndrome, right? Like, I see this, I see that, kind of thing. And again, it's about how you talk to yourself. So like, I used to find that funny. And then I'm like, you know what? No, because, like, really then I take on the personality of doing that. And so I have, like, because I do teach and I do coach around time productivity. And so I have some methods that I coach people on and that I apply for myself. One of them just being time blocking. like
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
like really getting in there, getting on my calendar. And if it's set on my calendar, it's a priority, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, and
Yep.
everything, self-care, dates with my husband, like all those kinds of things, they all go into the calendar. Otherwise they don't happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. I love that. Well, thank you.
All right. Well, unfortunately, for now, we're gonna have to leave it right there.
Yeah.
But I'm already envisioning Julie Jones.
Part 2.
Julie Scrumptious is going to be a regular on this gig, boys and girls, girls and boys.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So give us some plugs. We've talked about Zondra Network and some of the things, but where can people find you?
The easiest way is to go to my website, which is juliejones.biz, B-I-Z. And, I say I'm the one and only because I know I'm the one and only, Julie Jones.
Yeah.
And, of course, I'm all over social media, LinkedIn, which is how we connected,
Right.
and Facebook, Instagram. However, you can get to any of those from juliejones.biz.
Okay, awesome.
All right, we're going to leave it there.
Yeah. And as
Always, thank you in advance.
Just thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. Just thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. Yeah, we're thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah. We're thinking and growing and learning and knowing and thinking and growing and learning and knowing. Yeah.